What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another Adobe Live. I hope that y'all are doing well. I hope that your week has started off great. Happy Monday. Today, I'm really excited because we are joined by photographer Ashley Batz as she's going to show us how she makes her digital images look more film-like. So I'm excited. Ashley, welcome, girl. How you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Happy Monday. Before we get started, I want to kind of get the chat a little warmed up. So if y'all can let us know where you are joining from, please go ahead and drop in the chat. I am joining from very sunny and very hot Arizona. Ashley, where are you calling in from?
I'm in San Francisco. It's neither of those things. So
Lucky, because it is, yesterday was like 1:15 and I just was like,
no,
it's not the move at all. So let us know, y'all, where you're joining from, whether you are on YouTube or Behance. Join the conversation in the chat box. And just before we get started, just so you are aware, there are no creative challenges this week. Instead, we are launching our creative bootcamp. So this week, make sure that you join Andrew Hochrattle for a Creative Cloud Apps for Beginners bootcamp. Awesome. So Ashley, girl, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you. What do we have planned for today?
all right, I've got something really great planned for you. Something that I've noticed, and I'm sure all of you have too, are that a lot of images we're seeing might be film, may not be film on, when we're looking on Instagram or even some campaigns that you might see around town and on billboards and things like that. So I started out shooting film photos. What about you?
I've always been a digital type of girl. I want to get into film, but I've yet to make that cool, little transition and play around with film.
Yeah, it's tough. And actually, I started when I was so young and didn't really think much about it because it was literally the only medium that I had. And now that, we have digital imagery, we can actually try to start making it emulate a little bit more like film. And I'm noticing that some of my favorite images coming out right now are film, or who knows, maybe they look like film and they're digital. So I thought today maybe we would play around with how to make some of our digital photos look more like film.
Beautiful. Well, that sounds good to me. I hope that sounds great to y'all. I'm seeing we have some people joining from Northants, New Zealand. I see some people complaining about the 1:15 weather. Y'all do not want to, if you want to visit Arizona, come like in the
Not
fall.
now.
Don't come now, And make sure y'all go ahead and check Ashley's website as well as give her a follow on Instagram.
Aw, thanks.
Of course. Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Great. Well, I just wanted to show you my website and some of the things that I've done in the past. This is my overview page. And I guess if anything jumps out to you and you have a question, if it might be a film photo, feel free. But I've been working as a photographer for over a decade now. I started when I was 14 years old and didn't really ever stop. So yeah, and a lot of the work that I do is focused on people. As you can see, I love coming up with mini stories about people or even bringing out their best selves. So, and I do work as a photographer. So oftentimes I'm shooting product, I'm shooting clothing. So there are different attentions that I need to bring to the work that I do. But it all kind of comes down to one thing, which is people and making people feel good. And that's really fun with being a photographer. So that's my work.
Oh, I love it. And I love that you mentioned the people aspect. I kind of am very similar in my work. Everything that I do is about the person and the people that I'm shooting and making sure that they feel seen. And so I think that's beautiful. And I think that's very apparent in your images as well. Stunning, stunning work.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, how do you work with people when you photograph them? Have you met them before?
Not so. A lot of the times I haven't met them before. It's more so I'm really big on, I like to say I'm your biggest hype woman. So I will be the person to hype you up throughout the session. I'll show you the images throughout the session. So that way you start to feel comfortable. I think that especially people who haven't been in front of the camera, they need a little bit more of that attention and conversation, really.
Yeah.
I think it's just being able to connect, to have that conversation and make sure that they feel comfortable with you as the photographer. And then I think that shows up through the images. I think the first like 20 minutes of the shoot is that's kind of like, oh, like trial error the first 10, 20 minutes. And then they start to really feel into it and you really see who they are start to shine through the images.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I always think about my job as like being a really good dentist where someone walks out and they're like, wait, did that happen? But actually, I think that's actually a really good segue into the shoot that I'm going to show you. I pitched an editorial of my grandfather, and he's 96. And the first time I ever took his photo was of when I was 14. Took a photo of his hand holding some flowers. So I never actually took a proper portrait of him. And, a decade, more than a decade later at this point, I really wanted to do a fashion editorial with him. And, even though he's my grandfather, I still wanted to make him feel comfortable. So I don't know if you guys do this, but when I'm pitching, I create a deck. And this was the deck that I created when I actually pitched it to the magazine, and we got it. So my grandfather's named Pasquale. He's from Italy. He came to the United States illegally in order to find a better life for himself. And he nailed it. I mean, this guy came to New York, moved to California, worked on the Golden Gate Bridge, learned English, and he's still kicking it. So he's doing great. These are some photos of him on the Golden Gate Bridge. That's clearly me when I was born. But this guy's cool. And I wanted to do a really specific portrait moment of him. So I created a very small mood board of how I thought I'd like to show him. And I also think that it's rare that we get to see people of age diversity in, some higher fashion photos. And I think it's starting. But so I pitched this to an Italian magazine and they accepted it. And from there, I worked with a stylist and we got to photograph at his house. And it was such a great day. So I thought that I would show you guys a few of these images and we can take them into Lightroom, take a look at them, see if there's anything we want to do to make them look a little bit more filmic. And maybe you and I can pick one or two that we really want to work on in Photoshop.
Awesome. No, that sounds exciting. And it's so beautiful that you were able to pitch a project that's so personal and I don't know, that's amazing. So I'm really excited for today.
Good, me too. Okay, so I already put some into Lightroom. And here he is.
Come on. He out here styling, looking good, flexing for the camera.
Just in some casual Fendi. No
it's casual, yeah. Everyday Fendi.
Yeah. Just what he had lying around in the house. Yeah, so actually, this is also something interesting to think about, but the tools that you use in your hand also can help you provide a different color space. I usually shoot on Canon, but I actually rented a Fujifilm GFX 100 for the shoot. And I've heard, and I saw it with my own eyes, that it has its interesting color space. And so this is straight out the camera, and it gave me a different color space than what I was looking
used to. Yeah.
So again, like there are some things that you can do before to even just set you up for better success when you're in Lightroom or Photoshop. Or it's just something to note that like, okay, well, Canon cameras run a little bit more red or magenta. What can we do on our end? And clearly, Lightroom and Photoshop are so robust in those arenas that we can pretty much do anything at this point. But also for me, coming from a film backdrop, it's I need a little bit of a leg up sometimes. So,
I like that you mentioned the colors though, because I shoot primarily Canon. But I have some friends that do shoot Fuji, and I'd have like a Fuji, I think it's the X100V, like the small compact. And the colors are just, even just looking at this image, the colors are just so rich and stunning. And so I'm really excited to see how we can transform it and what that'll look like. But it is interesting to kind of keep in mind different cameras, their color profiles, and things of that nature when you're going into, shooting, and what you might do in post as well.
Absolutely. And so I know that you're interested in film, but may not know all that much about it. So that's exciting to talk about this. But essentially, as a digital photographer wanting to emulate film, I think it's really important to look at what the film stocks are and what their color profiles are. So I had a few in mind that we could think about. And I also think it comes down to personal preference as well. And that's also the beauty of digital photography, is like, maybe you want it to look like Portra 400, but maybe you don't think it actually looks good. So why don't you just do it as you see fit? But I think that the main thing when thinking about how to make your digital image look like film, it really comes down to a couple of things. And I would say it's color, contrast, highlights, and texture. So first of all, film, the way that it handles highlights are way different than the way that a digital camera handles highlights. So highlights have a bit more gradation in terms of film, if that makes any sense. And same with shadows. There's just a lot more width that you can see in the image. So not only when I made these images, I tried to light them in a way that would set me up for success when editing them. But also you need to think about those things when you're in Lightroom or Photoshop. And then to color. Well, so let's just talk about highlights actually. So I really shot this a little bit underexposed, and I think that's helpful for me because then nothing's too blown out so that I can't bring it back.
Exactly.
So I'm just going to make sure my brightness is all the way up. There it is. And so right now everything is zeroed out here, as you can see. And I'm going to just start toggling and making sure where my highlights are. And I just like to go all the way just to see what's happening. So I'm kind of in a good spot already. And there are some images that need a little bit more love than this one in terms of the highlights. But again, a film photo typically doesn't have super, super blown out highlights unless you're in more of like a silhouette or something like that. So we're going to just work on the highlights and the shadows and just see, again, like a film photo, I'll see a little bit more detail in the shadows. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. So I'll bring it down just to show you. And I'm looking at his really casual Fendi outfit, of course. And
very casual.
Yeah. No, just asked him to throw something on. No problem. And yeah, so it's already looking a little bit better to me. And then I'll come back and just check my exposure actually. So like I got my highlights and my shadows to a good place. Like, how do we feel about it? So I kind of just went down 1/10 actually. So that's a good start for highlights and shadows. And again, I think we can go through some of these other ones and talk about where they need a little bit more love. So highlights and shadows are huge for film. We'll get into color last, I think, because that's going to be the more in-depth thought process. But what else did I think about? Contrast. So I want to say that overall, most film stock images are, film stocks are a bit more low contrast. Maybe not so much for black and white images, but just something to think about. A great way that I love to do this in Lightroom is actually to take the clarity down just a tiny bit. I don't know if you're familiar with some really fancy filters on your camera, like Pro Mist. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So this is a cheaper Pro Mist because Pro Mist is very expensive.
Yeah.
But it's essentially there's a filter that you can put on your camera and it just gives this healthy amount of haze, and there's various degrees of it. But I do not have Pro Mist, so I love to put clarity.
This is the nice little DIY hack.
This is the hack. So again, I always like to go all the way down just to see what the actual tool's doing, because I think it's nice to know. And then you can bring it back up. But essentially a film photo, in my opinion, is less contrasty and has a little less clarity. So it's not necessarily blurry, but you know, there's this like, it's almost like a movie that's shot in film at 24 frames a second. There's this healthy amount of, you know, it's not super real, like a reality TV show, you know, like those are shot with like different types of thoughts in mind. So, and then I'll bring the contrast down as well and see. But it's already kind of looking more like film as we go. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I think that I like how you kind of group everything, or you kind of plan out what you're doing one by one. And I also really like how you're taking the slider back and forth to really see and understand what you're doing. But I just like how you're breaking it up, like understanding what highlights and shadows, contrast look like in film, so that way you can really work to emulate it here. And then going back and forth to really see what the change really looks like. So I think it's already starting to look like film, and the colors and everything still look so beautiful. Oh my goodness, I love it so far.
That's great. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I use both Lightroom and Photoshop in both of my process, because I love to do a batch edit on my images in Lightroom. And I know that there's a lot more you can do in Lightroom than I actually do. But for me, it's a good way to see the blanket, you know, overhead view of what I've done, and then take them into Photoshop. Even if I do this, you know, this 3 times over in, you know, a raw image here and in Photoshop, I still think this helps me just kind of understand where I can take an image. And depending on how you feel more comfortable about which program, I think it's nice to just kind of use the two.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I use the two in my workflow as well. If I'm doing like larger projects, like I don't shoot weddings no more, but when I was shooting weddings, I would use Lightroom for that all the way, just because of the batch editing, how easy it was. But you just sometimes you have those couple of images that you just want to go wild with and kind of go into fantasy land with Photoshop. So I always encourage people to utilize both programs to see, you know, how can you test the limits with both of them and see what you can do and how you can be creative. So I'm definitely a fan of utilizing both.
Awesome. I'm so glad. Yeah, I started out shooting weddings. That's so fun.
Ooh, girl.
I know. It's the gateway. That's what I say.
It's the gateway.
But yeah, I think Lightroom's great for this sort of thing too. It's just it's a good visual tool to see like where you can take something. So, and then, you know, we can keep going with like our blacks and our whites in terms of this tone curve area. I love playing with this as well. Like, and again, like, I feel like there's just no wrong answers. And the more that you play with these things, the more that you understand what your eye likes, and it ends up being your own. So, but with the, you know, just knowing that a film photo has lower contrast, less clarity, and then the highlights and the shadows are brought in a bit. So we can talk about that. So if you wanted to keep going, we can just take our highlight slider and see what's going on here. It's not a lot, but it's going to be impactful if I start bringing these things back in, I think, and just making sure that like I'm holding true to what my original intent was.
Yes.
And again, like I think shadows come up in a film image. And you can also do this in your tone curves within color spaces as well. So we can always think about that. And now I think we should talk about color.
Yay!
Oh my gosh.
Oh, color.
Oh. So this is actually a good refresher for me. So I actually went in and did some research on actual color profiles of film. And I think some of the most popular ones are Portra. There's Portra 160, 400, and 800 that I think are the most popular. And they all kind of have the same characteristics, which are that the undertones are a bit more like red and just more warm, I would say. So as opposed to more of like other ones like Kodak Ektar is another really popular one. And those are more vibrant and cool. So in Kodak Ektar, I noticed that like if you were shooting a blue sunny day, the blues are really, really blue, almost teal blue. And then things become a little bit more orange and like marigold. So Portra is the people's choice for shooting portraits. It actually emulates people's skin tones a little bit better.
Yep.
So I think that we typically want to use Portra for the most part, unless you're getting creative. But for this, and again, I think it's just to your taste and your preference, but I'm shooting a creative editorial here, but not only do I think the designers of this want to make sure that their clothing looks kind of close to what it is, but I also want to represent my grandpa pretty well too. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. And also, before we move forward, if y'all have any questions for
Yes.
Ashley, be sure to drop them in the chat, whether you are in YouTube land or you're over here in Behance. Drop your questions in the chat. That way we can continue the discussion. So I just want to make sure y'all know that you can do that. So throw those questions for us, because we like the conversation.
Yeah, and if you have questions,
I'll have questions. I'll have questions. We could talk.
I know some of my friends were like, I'm gonna jump in and ask you a very difficult question. I was like, please don't do that.
No. Not that's not me at all.
Yeah, one of my like expert retoucher friends, I was like, no, we're not doing that today. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, so Portra. Let's talk about Portra.
Mm-hmm.
I have some notes here. I hope it's okay to slide over with some notes just to show you. I'll bring this all back. But I made some cheat sheets for everyone. Do you see this down here?
Yes, I do.
Portra is known for their natural warmth. So there's a yellowish highlight and a bluish shadow. And then we can get a little bit more granular. So 160 has red and brown undertones, 400 has orange and yellow, and 800 has higher saturation and is slightly grainier. As we know, a higher ISO has a bit more grain. So I think that maybe we'll want to... Let's go with Portra 400 on this one. So orange and yellow undertones. But essentially, Portra is a little bit yellow in the highlights and then a little bit blue in the shadows. And I also think that if you were a huge fan of Annie Leibovitz like me, she has a similar situation for the most part, I would say. So anyways, so we can go into our hue, saturation, luminance panel over here, and we can start playing with it. How do you feel about it?
Yes.
Or actually, maybe we'll start with this white balance, because that's actually where I would start now that I'm thinking about it. So just as a blanket edit, I'm just going to start again toggling one way and the other. It's like, oh, that's cooler. That makes sense. And that's warmer. That makes sense. We're doing good. And this is more green, which is more Annie Leibovitz, if anyone wants.
Yep.
And this is more magenta. So now that you know that Portra 400 has more warmer tones, I know that I should stay here, but what do you think about the tint? Do you think it should be more magenta or more green?
So I really liked it more green,
personally. I did too.
Yeah, I liked it more green. It gave a certain character to the image.
Right?
So yeah, I'm a green fan.
Okay, me too. I think that's how I originally did it too. But,
beautiful. Yeah. Because I see what you're seeing, girl. That green just added a little bit more character, and I just loved the way it looked.
Yeah, I did too. And I feel like, I don't know what it was about the green. Again, like I really feel like there's no wrong answers when it comes to photography. It's really just taste and preference. So yeah, I'm glad that you liked it too. And that's how this all works. So we can take a look at hue, saturation, luminance. We can also take a look at color grading. So I might actually go more into the color grading aspect. I think that'll help with our more blanket situations. And this is all about play. So we learned that Portra 400 has more of a yellowish highlight. So I'm going to go in the highlight, and I'm just going to start dragging it to be more yellow. And sometimes, again, I'll take it all the way and see how it looks, because you can always bring it back, and that's the best part. So here's before. I mean, I love it being a little bit more yellow. It just kind of gives this aura about it.
I love it.
And from there, you can actually decide like, this is like the opacity and how intense it is, which is great to have that also as a litmus test for yourself. So we're going to stick with this in terms of more of a yellowish highlight. And then the shadows for Portra 400 are a bit more blue. And I think when shadows are more blue, you actually see a little bit more detail as well,
Yeah.
which is also indicative of a film photo, in my opinion. So I'm just starting to bring the blue in. It's really affecting like the Fendi outfit the most, which is cool. And we're just, we're doing a good old fashioned split tone right now, which is great.
I love it.
Again, playing with how intense that action is. I love it. That's looking so good.
I love to use those color wheels. Whenever I'm I tend to go back and forth between either color grading and either Lightroom or Photoshop. There's obviously different tools that you can utilize, but I love these color wheels because they're just so easy to use. And it's just really great to see how like the intensity, you can pick a color and see, and like you said, there's really no right or wrong way. But I just love how easy it is to really kind of tone and add more of a style to your images as far as color goes.
Yeah. And I agree. And I also like to go back and forth and be like, even though this is like a different photo, I mean, look how far we've come. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yep. And it's definitely looking so much more like film. Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and I think like if you're looking in the shadows, right, like it's just more of a gradation here. Like things aren't falling off completely, but I'm still feeling like I'm in the room and it's dimly lit. And when I did shoot this, I wish I had a behind the scenes photo for you, but to camera left, so his right, there is just one really soft light source through a little bit of diffusion. And everything else is kind of what I would call a practical light. So to his left, our right, there's a lamp that's kind of coming, cascading onto the couch. And so yeah, again, like I think setting yourself up for success when you're shooting only helps you in the Lightroom and Photoshop phase. So
absolutely.
We can come back into hue, saturation, luminance and just start playing with it. And again, it's like all to taste. So like, the reds are affecting his face. So we're going to keep it pretty warm. Make sure he looks good. He wants to be a movie star. So he did ask me that. He was like, am I going to be a movie star? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Already is,
in my opinion. Yeah, not a lot needed here, which is great. And again, just like double checking, we've kind of come at it more from the highlights and shadows first. I think that that's a good time to start, just to like recap in my brain. I think you should start with highlights and shadows and then move to, if you want to do clarity, I think you can add that at the end as well. But I would really leave that color work till the end, just to make sure that you like where it's going. And then I think we should add some grain. Yes. I always love to add my lens profiles, except I don't have Fuji on here. Ooh, I got to add something. That's so exciting. But yeah, here's our grain. And I did take some notes. I think what's funny is I was reading a lot about how other people like to emulate film, just to kind of double check that what I was doing made a whole bunch of sense. And there are some rubrics around like how much grain you should add per, per film stock. And we can talk about that. But I thought I had it here. Yes. Well, so I found that Portra 800 had grain that was like 45 in terms of size and, amount 45, size 40, roughness 15, which is, indicative of a Lightroom situation. But again, I think it's really up to you and your personal preference. I think ISO 400 film doesn't really need a lot. And we can just keep playing with it and zoom in a bit, see how that's looking. But again, I think talking about a film photo, it really comes down to some texture.
Absolutely. And that's probably my favorite part. I love to see the texture. Well, color and texture are probably my two favorite parts when it comes to looking at film images and seeing just how it really just comes to life, and you feel like it feels more tangible. I don't know if that makes sense, but it feels a lot more tangible.
Absolutely. So how do we feel? Is this a good?
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. How do y'all feel about it? I love it. Can we see the before and after again of this image?
Yes. I wish I knew the hot tool for that, actually.
I think there's like if you go down to where next to soft proofing, like either click on that YY, it should put the before and after next to each other. There you go.
Love you for that.
A little tip. Oh, that is beautiful. That is so beautiful.
I mean, actually, look at even the couch, right? Like the couch feels a little bit more tangible. It feels like you're there.
Exactly.
I think we took a lot of the we did take a lot of the contrast out. I feel like it's really looking more like a film photo. That's crazy.
It is, and like all of the detail in his pants, even like the wrinkles and everything. It's just so beautiful. The color of his skin. I absolutely love. And I love how you still like maintained, you didn't change any of the colors too much. So I feel like you still, especially from the style aspect of like a stylist and wanting the clothes to come up as they truly are. I don't think you did too much there either. And so it's just so beautiful.
Yay. Well, we're going to do my favorite thing, which is grab all of these and do a little batch edit. I love that. Yes. It's so exciting. We're going to sync everything.
And there we go.
And, oh wait, can I make it go away now?
Yeah, click on the, that one. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God, I learned something new. I love it. So we're just going to check through now, and it takes a little while to render just because the files are so big from a Fuji.
How big are they?
They're insane.
They're just too big.
Someone wants to drop that info into the chat.
Yeah, it's just too big.
When I was shooting to my computer, the computer was like, hold on for dear life. So, you know what I'm noticing is that maybe I went up in exposure a bit on some of these when I was shooting. So I'm just going to kind of bring them down even more. I want to keep that like moody aspect. What do you think?
I agree.
And this is just, this is just me eyeballing. There's a definite way that I think we could keep it consistent. But my goal for an editorial is really to have one image per look. So, you only need to pick one, which we're going to need to. So I'm going to need your help. Nice and moody, nice and moody, nice and moody. That's great. He's like in mid-conversation here, which is awesome. All right, let's go to the kitchen. We're in the kitchen.
Yes.
So clearly a typical outfit for him.
Just something small, just throw it on for lunch, Yeah.
So when I was thinking about this editorial, I was really trying to replicate some images in my head that I've seen over and over again since I was a kid. So, sitting in the living room talking, this is a very normal view for me. Sitting across from each other at the table. He actually made these spaghetti and clams for us, which was great. And we had an idea for the outfit, but it really was this tank top. But the stylist was like, this isn't enough styling. So then she added this necklace, which is like, not normal, but he was such a champ and was like, let's do it. So pretty cool.
I love the perspective of this image. Like you just said, like it gives that feeling of, and I'm excited to see what the final image looks like, but it gives that feeling of you sitting at the table with him, with being able to see your plate. And it just the angle that it was shot at is really beautiful as well.
Yeah, I know it's more personal for me, but I hope that it does bring some sort of brings you into the family life that I've had for so many years. Absolutely. So I think the first thing, and I don't know if you noticed this, is that the highlights are just screaming in the back. So I don't actually know if they can be brought back a ton. And I should have thought about that when I was shooting it, if I wanted it to be a little bit more film. But we can see, I mean, it's Fuji GFX, has a lot of bandwidth. I mean, it's kind of doing it. I'm not mad at it.
Not mad at all.
I think we're going to take it down a lot. The thought process when I was shooting this, if this is helpful, is that was going to be one of my main sources of light. I love a backlit photo. I feel like it makes it feel more in the moment when something is not directly lit, where you're like, you know, it just feels like we're there, and that's how it's lit, and you're thinking more of like a cinema type image, if that's helpful. So brought the highlights down, and let's talk about the shadows. I mean, again, shadows should be a little bit up in terms of a film photo. I'm already seeing that there's some blue undertones. I don't know.
I'm seeing that as well. Which
is nice. I'm going to keep bringing these up actually and just seeing where it's taking us. So at some point, I feel like it kind of makes the image look a little weird. So it's nice to just bring it back until you feel like it's the right place. Very nice. And let's just check our blacks on this one, because I think there's some heavier colors in here. So again, highlights and shadows, so important for a film photo. And then let's talk about contrast. So love my DIY Pro Mist. Again, love to bring it all the way down just to see what it's actually affecting. I think the one call out is, you know, he has some really heavy set wrinkles, not even close for a 96-year-old, gotta be honest, amazing. But I think adding some clarity when it's too much, you can tell that it's not good for, you know, his skin. It's like, I want to see what he actually looks like too.
Agreed. Did you say he's 96?
Yeah. I know.
That's a blessing. And the skin is giving for it.
It's amazing. I'm like, no Photoshop needed for him. His
Not
skin.
At all.
My God. And, you know, just to like keep playing, I love a tone curve. We love a tone curve.
Yes, we do.
I feel like you can just kind of, the best thing about Lightroom is that you can use the same tool in different ways, and it'll start to affect it a little bit better. And so what's great is you can see what that tone curve is actually doing, which is so nice. When also, if you're trying to learn Photoshop and you're not quite sure what it's doing, this is a good way to see that I can use this slider, and much like a curve in Photoshop, so that it's not so scary, you know?
Yep.
Perfect. So just playing around, tone curve, looking good so far. Let's talk about color. So do you want to stick with the same idea of like a yellowish highlight and a blue shadow?
I can go either way. Yeah. Let's stick to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just in case. Let's what happens if we did our shadows more red? Just so we see.
So we just see it.
Just so you see it.
Oh, wow.
Or, you know, this is a different look. This is already filmic right here, right?
Yes. I actually really love that kind of, what was it, like a teal?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
I also think that there are some ways that you can make it look like it was really underexposed, and sometimes it really is in the color space. So this actually makes it feel like I underexposed this and it was really dark in there. So again, like, I think you can make up a storyline that makes sense for you and kind of run with it, and just make sure that it's consistent so that when you put all of the images together, it feels like one story. So I'm just going to bring those shadows to a little bit of blue, and we're going to do our highlights at more of like a yellow. And again, it's like affecting, what is it affecting? And then the shadows, what is it affecting? I'm going to bring that up quite a bit, actually. Let's do our fancy before and after.
Yes.
Oh my God, look at that.
Oh, that's nice. Beautiful. That's really beautiful.
That's really good. I feel like the thing that I'm missing is maybe some of this warmth back here.
Agreed.
So maybe we can affect it a little bit more in this, you know, these are all more global. I know that there's ways to use brushes and things like that, but I usually typically use that more in Photoshop, and we'll see that. So I just figured this would be more of like a blanket look at an image. So just bringing a little bit more orange into play, I think would be nice. Let's check it out. Very nice.
Oh, beautiful.
How fun. I think that, you know, maybe I want like a little bit more of dynamic to it still. And again, these are just like fine tuning, and then I'm going to do it all over again in Photoshop because I love that. It's just so nice to like spend the time, really. There's a time when you don't, and there's time when you do.
Exactly.
And I think for your grandfather, you're going to spend the time.
You want to spend the time, absolutely.
All right, we'll do my favorite thing. We're going to sync those.
Yes.
And again, you can choose what to sync and what not to sync. I typically do everything except for a crop. What about, do you do that same thing?
Yeah, I technically do everything as well, and I synchronize or kind of do my batch editing in the same exact way. Either that or I'll like Control C and then like click and then Control V, but either way, that's the same thing that I do there.
So I'm noticing that these came out a little bit more warm.
Oh, I love that image. Where the one
talking
before?
To me?
Yeah, talking to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how he always talks to me like that. Oh gosh. Yeah, I think that maybe I lost a little bit of blue, and you know what might have happened is I was shooting and someone changed something when we were lighting it, and I just want to make it a little bit more consistent. So we're just going to make sure the blues are blue, the highlights are highlights, you know, and it doesn't have to be perfect for now. But
and there's also a comment, maybe we can go back and show in that first image. Richard said that, you know, maybe it's his eyes, but they're not able to see the change with the oranges. So I think we were trying to add a little bit of the warmth in the back. So maybe we can call that out a little bit more for it to kind of see what that did.
Yeah, so it's more of a global, but it really, when I'm working on this orange saturation, it looks like it is affecting a little bit more of that back more than anything. And we can go in with our spot brushes and things like that and really go into it, I think. But this is more of like a more global effect, color grade that I think, you know, I'm looking here right behind him in the oven. And I'm noticing that I think it's really just the blues that are taking over a little bit here, which is great. And I'm seeing even like, if you look here, I'm seeing a lot more definition or just more clarity here, which is awesome. And I think that if you wanted to take it into Photoshop and add more warmth there, we totally can. So yeah, I think that's a good call out.
Love.
Very light touch there. So yeah, let's just take a look through. These ended up being a little bit warmer, and we can address that in Photoshop if one of these is our final choice. I definitely love this one where he's, you know.
That's the one yep.
So cute. All right, let's go outside. He has a really good green thumb. And these are called elephant lemons. And they're not really used for anything. You can't really eat them. They've got like the thickest like pith essentially. But he's got his Celine top on, and we're gonna hang out.
Just casually outside picking, you know, like not a big deal.
Yeah.
Just in my Celine top.
Look at this
guy.
I
love this image.
Look at this guy.
Oh wow.
So this is already giving me Annie Leibovitz. I don't know about you.
No, it is.
Hope she's not watching. She's like, oh no. Oh no, you don't. But I am noticing that's a bit contrasty, and I think the main thing is that the black shirt, the black pants are just so dark that it's immediate that it's not a film photo. So we're gonna play with that. We're gonna bring our highlights down. And I think when I brought the highlights down, I don't know about you, but it felt like just more golden hour, which was nice.
It does.
And then I'm bringing up the shadows and just seeing what's happening here. And again, like toggling back and forth and seeing is so helpful as a visual person. And I think that as you've read, I don't know if you've read a bunch of tutorials too, but people have these recipes that are like, add this amount of shadow or take away. And I just think that that's not the right approach. I think you really should
just kind of just see and let yourself, like, I think that's the great part of like exploring who you are as a creative too. Like just explore literally, like especially when I try to teach people how I edit, I try to not say that this is how I do this. It's just, or that you should do something in a certain way. Just slide back and forth and see what you like, and allow your eye to kind of be trained to kind of go in whatever direction it wants to be led in.
Right. And I think that, you know, the beauty of these tools, Photoshop and Lightroom specifically, are for you to do just that. And, you know, these are just tools to manipulate images, but you can take it any which way. And maybe you'll come up with your own style at the end of it if you just really go into it. So
and we do have a question. And I think this is a good spot for us also to just provide an overall recap of the shoot and everything and who this is to you. Because Richard did ask, and it was for some people that might have missed the beginning. They want to kind of know who this person is and a little bit more information about the shoot.
Oh, well, maybe they can tell me who they think he is.
I mean, Richard already asked, is this your granddad? So
no. Yes. This is an aspiring model named Pasquale. He is my 96-year-old grandfather, and this is a recent shoot that I did in April for a magazine, and it's going to be coming out in September. So y'all are getting a sneak peek before even the magazine is. So, oops. Which is great. So yeah, I just, for Richard and other folks that are interested, I pitched this shoot to a magazine. I created a whole deck, which is really fun. And in that deck, I actually provided a lot of image references that were filmic. And I was going to shoot some film, but for time's sake, because we were also doing a motion piece, I mostly shot digital, just to be safe, really. Because, you know, it's been a while since I've shot a ton of film and I didn't want to screw it up, essentially. I was like, I don't know, it's so important. So now what I'm doing is going back into Lightroom and Photoshop later, and we're going to make it look more like a film photo.
Love it.
Yeah.
So bing, 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 Richard, you got it right on the money. Right on the money.
I knew you would, Richard. I knew you would. So Richard, I just wanted to tell you that I'm taking the highlights down, and everyone else, and bringing the shadows up. So pulling the shadows, I would call it. I think people have different words for things, but I like to I say pulling because I'm pulling it out. And I'm trying to see if I can get a little bit more detail into his outfit. And I think I am, and I think it's like authentically going a little bit more blue, which is interesting that's more of a film look. So we did our highlights, we did our shadows. You can just kind of go down here and add some of that, you know, clarity, our interest, our digital pro mist, as I would call it. And just see, I mean, like, let's take it all the way, right?
Yeah, you can really see.
Perfect. Some highlights. Let's just keep looking. Like, where are our highlights? Like, what's happening? Interesting that when you take it all the way down, it almost kicks it back onto that top. So just keep bringing it down. Basically, like, want to bring that space closer between highlights and shadows, in my opinion. Do you go for more of a filmic look when you're editing as well? Or what's kind of your style?
My style is very, very vibrant. And the reason why is because when I got into photography, it was mainly because I wanted to shoot people that looked like me. And because I started in college and a lot of the people that were shooting didn't know. And this is one thing I really loved about your work. You do really, really great with shooting different skin tones and how they're edited and making sure they come up as authentic to to how I would imagine that person probably looks in real life. And so that's why I got into photography, but I kind of go down the more vibrant side, because I think as being a Black girl, I feel like I used to be very like afraid of color, that, oh, I won't look good in yellow, orange, or certain colors that might be too bright for my skin complexion. And so I love to take that into my coloring when I'm shooting. Just a lot, just in general, I like to just look as vibrant as much as possible. And that's why I love color, because you can really play around with different colors and how vibrant they are. But I'm really loving this style of shooting, of editing that you're doing, because it's more like, it's not as vibrant, but I guess it's just more film-like. And so I think I'm kind of interested in playing around with that and seeing what that looks like more. So I'm definitely making some mental notes of how I can play around with color and kind of get more of this style. But that's usually what I do, is try to, I might put myself in front of different colors and just see how I can really bring everything together and make it feel really vibrant and rich, essentially.
Well, I think that, I'm curious for your work if you keep that same scenario when you're shooting, but then in your editing, it's a bit more of this filmic look. Like, how did the colors play? I'm just so curious. So you'll have to show me.
Oh, girl, don't worry, we can connect and talk all about it.
I know, I want to see. I think it would be amazing. And I think I was thinking about something else. Oh, well, that, what we haven't done is Kodak or Ektar.
Yes, let's try that.
So we could find one of I don't know if my images would be great for that, but I can show you, I can show you some things when we transition to Photoshop about what that might look like. And that might be a really good situation for you. So
I'm excited. Ooh.
So, okay, shadows. We're going to go into the more blue tones, and I think really pulling it on this one is important. But just to show you, like, this is definitely a film look a la the 80s, I think, when we had more green. And then here's more of like a Kodak look, where like it's way more yellow in the shadows. So, thinking about that, this is more of like the red undertone that we were talking about. And I think it's all personal preference. I kind of am loving this, like, this blue split tone.
I love the blue split tone. I don't know what it is.
I can't get away from it.
It's just so breathtaking, and the way that it brings out so much of that detail. It's just so beautiful.
And I think that it kind of makes it feel really grounded in the place, and it's not real, right? But it's real and it's not real.
I like that you said that. I like that you said that, because it does feel a lot more grounded. It doesn't feel like,
here's before and after.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right? Yeah, it does feel like it's like a time and a place, and it makes you stop a little bit and think about it. So I love that. I think it's looking really good. And there are so many ways that we can go about it. This is just the way that you and I are gravitating towards, which is a great feeling. Let's see, any sort of hue changes? How do we feel? Maybe like the yellow of the oranges. I'm just curious, right?
Let's see what that looks like.
So this is going to be more of like a warm, and this is also affecting his skin tone. So I think it needs to be very light, whatever we do decide. I'm going to keep it a little bit more yellow. And then make sure his skin tone doesn't go too orange either. Yeah, that's feeling good. And then we haven't done anything with our global white balance. So let's just like take a look if it were a bit more cool. I love a warm image. That's kind of where I'm at these days.
I love a warm image as well.
And I'm keeping it a little bit green. And I think what's great is that this is super consistent with the other two images, which only makes it better for an editorial. So
exactly.
I'm gonna just do a little before and after. Looks good.
I just love how, especially the outfit that he's wearing, the tone of his outfit now is just so stunning.
Yeah, it's giving it a little bit more less tinsel, more fashion.
Yep.
So I'm just doing a little syncing just to make sure. What a handsome guy. Ooh, serious. I think I told him to be serious. Oh my God.
What was it like? If you could just take a moment to just talk about what did this feel like, trying to give your grandfather some direction and try to be like more serious, more playful, talk to, like, was he doing his own thing? Was he taking direction? Like, how did that kind of come about?
Well, I mean, I have to say, he's a very social guy. He's the guy that he goes to the market and everyone knows who he is. And the pandemic kind of ruined a lot of that social activity for him. So to have me there, I had a whole crew of people that were doing motion. He was loving it. And he, English is not his first language, but he's been here for a long time. And he doesn't really understand many people, but he understands me because he's known me for my whole life. So he really listened, and I think he really enjoyed it. And I wonder if in another life he would have been a model. Like, he's just got he's just kind of got it. And I hope that any casting director that's watching this now, maybe wants to hire him for a campaign.
Come on.
He is truly a talent, and he is older, and he did, we were at this for about 6 hours, and he did so good. So yeah, I mean, there's a healthy amount of, and actually I have a question for you, because I do stray away from shooting people that I know, because I have my certain way of going about things to get something out of someone. And so I think if you knew me, you would know what I was doing, and it would be like, okay. So if you don't know me, I think it's easier for me to direct you and make you feel a certain way.
I agree.
But so I think this was a good challenge for me, because this is obviously someone I know very well, and I've always been afraid to shoot, people that are in my family, and I'm not, but I think there's just another level of how, do you shoot people that you do know really well, and what's that like?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of my, if you go through my website, a lot of the people that are there are people that I know. And there's just something special with being able to, I came into photography because you get to capture moments that will last literally beyond my own lifetime. And I think there's something beautiful about capturing the people that you know, and being able to capture them in the way that you see them. And so a lot of my work that especially when I was just trying to do projects just to get work, a lot of it was with friends, and everyone's usually down to, I want to do a shoot, or I don't know if I'll feel comfortable in front of the camera. I like to take that as a challenge. But then doing that and feeling more comfortable that's what helped me feel comfortable, because they let me do whatever I want to do.
Oh, cool.
And then I took that to the people that I don't know. So I kind of do what you do, but in the opposite.
I love it.
But it's just something, I love this concept, because this is obviously a very intimate moment between you and your grandfather, but it's just so beautiful for you to see how you see him. And so that's just absolutely beautiful, and to be able to be vulnerable enough to share this with the rest of the world, and that whenever it comes out in the magazine, even here on Adobe Live, it's just it pulls up my heartstrings, girl.
Thank you. That's so great.
Yes. And then Richard also said, I think Richard, he out here joining the conversation. He said, if I have to shoot people, I'd rather know them. Being on the spectrum makes it difficult for me to interface with people in person. And so I love that as well, because, there's a level of comfort too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's great. And it also gives you that chance to try some new tools with talking with people you already know, and just testing the waters. I think that's the best.
Yeah.
That's the best. I just wanted to be like a commercial photographer from day one.
I love that. Because I'm in a place now where I'm wanting to make that transition. Everything's very local, and everything's very personal with my fans, families, etc. Shooting events for people that I know, shooting the I don't like to do weddings, but I'll do the engagement photos for all of my friends when they go, because I just like to be able to be the one that captured that, and to if there's a skill that I have, then I can offer it to the people that I love. But now making the transition, it's also wanting to make the transition to more of a commercial world. It's being comfortable with really anybody, and being able to connect with them quickly, especially.
Quickly. The answer is quickly. Well, if you met my grandfather, he would connect with you very quickly. He'd be like, okay, let's hang out. What are you doing?
Ooh, these are beautiful.
So actually, this is really cool. This is a little behind the scenes. So, we were here shooting, and what actually was right behind him was this really large black piece of cloth called duvetine. It's a really good way to softly suck up some light. So you can tell that it already, even in this raw photo, it already has it's not so dark that it just, eats up the light, but you can see that it has a little bit of something going on. So he was actually sitting there just in between things, waiting to see what we were doing next. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So we didn't have a full outfit for him. So he's wearing his slides and his socks, and it's amazing.
Oh, I love it.
So same thing. I think this one is really going to lend itself to more of that blue-yellow split tone. But again, I think just for fun, we should try some things. The highlights are looking pretty good, but you can really tell that dropping that down a lot is really interesting. And then we're going to pull the shadows, because as we know, a good film photo has some good pulled shadows. And again, as I'm doing it, you can see it's naturally wanting to go a bit more blue, which is awesome. It's like, oh, I'm seeing it in real time. I know that Portra tends to have a blue undertone and a yellow highlight. Oh my God, it's already doing it. I love it.
It's already naturally moving in that way.
So great. Visual people. And so I'm just, again, toggling with this highlight, toggling with this light, pulling up the darks and the shadows. And let's just take a quick look. I mean, that's already looking like it, right?
And I just, like you said, that blue is really starting to come through.
Yeah.
And it already looks like film. Oh, that's beautiful.
So good. And let's just double check our white balance is doing what we want it to do. This is more Annie Leibovitz if we go more blue with some green. So there's that option. I'm gonna leave this up to you on this one. Here's more warm, and we'll still leave it green. What do you think?
Go back to the warm, or go back to the warm. Let me see that one more time.
This was cool.
Yeah.
I feel like it's cool.
I think it's cool too.
Yeah. Something around there. And it's not, but I've only gone -8 on both.
Yeah, it's not too much, but it's
it's just enough.
Yeah, it's just enough.
And we haven't done this yet, but maybe a tone curve in the blues and the yellows just to really drive things home. And we're going to do this in Photoshop, but basically I'm just pulling the shadows into more blue and the highlights more into yellow, just to see. That's not bad. I think it's a little heavy-handed, but again, I think when it's a tutorial, sometimes it's nice to just go for it.
Yeah, just go for it.
Yeah, I would say the best is just very, very minute changes.
Oh, this is beautiful. And even Richard said I think I usually prefer cooler images. And you said do you navigate more towards warmer images? Is that what you mentioned before, correct?
Yeah, I do. I think that I'm starting to make the transition to a cool...
I want to make the transition as well, because there's something about cool images that are just more, the style of it all is just so beautiful, and so it strikes me a bit more. But I'm comfortable in warm. That's my thing.
I think in terms of all skin tones, warm is better. And when you will make the transition to your big campaign shoots, warmer is typically better on skin tones, like I said. And if you're shooting a lot of skin, you don't want it to look like there's some, something off or something like that. So there's a healthy balance of, making something creative and then also having, like, I would call it product clarity, whether it's on the person themselves or their clothing or whatever it is you're trying to talk about. So I'm still trying to figure out that space where it's most comfortable. But my favorite photographers, and I'm sure yours are too, probably have less of a regard for, you know, of the reality of things. So I need a little bit of that too.
Same.
So perfect. Let's go into some of our, let's just hit home our color grading and play around. So we did a tone curve. So what I like to do is just like rotate around this small circle and just see what's going on. And we already gave the shadows quite a bit. So I think that I don't need to do much in this color grading area, except for just make sure that it's still blue. And then the highlights, make sure that it's still yellow.
I just love how I'm really excited to try to take some of these tips and see what it looks like in my work, because I just love how you were able to just really grade the whole image without even touching the color wheel, and just, oh, it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I think we're gonna just add some grain.
Yes. Finish it up with some grain.
And let's check.
Yep.
Loving it.
Loving it.
All right, let's copy paste. Sync that.
Yeah,
before
that's
and
beautiful.
after. Before and after. And these are not cropped either, so we can always go into some more creative cropping and talk about how to make it look like more like film.
Oh, I love this image.
That's so great.
This is beautiful.
Oh, so good. Awesome.
12 out of 10.
So we got 2 more looks. How do we feel? Good?
Yes, I'm feeling good. Are y'all feeling good? Because this is I've been smiling the whole time. My cheeks are starting to hurt.
Oh my God. So this photo, every time I leave for, many years, he always makes me roll down the window, and we end up having another 10 to 15 minute conversation. So we just put him in a really casual Celine leather jacket and his own hat, where he's from. He's from Naples. And this is what we do. This is literally
I love this so much.
Burned into my brain.
Oh my goodness. It's so, I had as soon as you clicked on this image, my eyes started to well up a little bit. I'm getting a little teary eyed over it, because this is so it's so personal.
Yeah.
But it's so relatable. When I've recently left my parents' house a year ago. Aww. So when you go and visit and they follow you all the way to the car, especially, and they just want to take every last second to just talk to you until you drive off.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you capture this, because it captures that feeling so well.
Oh yeah. No, it's just, it's so great to just solidify these memories. And it's nice that you relate to it too. It's not just like our thing, I love that part too, that someone's going to look at this and be like, my grandfather talks to me in my car and you can't leave, and it's great. Oh, wow. So I don't know about you, but the first thing I noticed that is not a film photo is that the highlights, right? Crazy. What did I do? What was I thinking? So I'm just going to start bringing them down a bunch, almost all the way.
Yep. There we go.
Right? Again, it's you want to think about that gradation. You want to understand that a film photo actually has a lot more width than you think. Even though it's you took it, you have no idea what it looks like. You can't even scan a film photo and bring it into Lightroom and still work on it. And it still has a lot of bandwidth. So with that, I'm going to open up the shadows as well and just make sure. And I think this is when I'm thinking about this, there's so many ways that back in the day when you just shot film, you could have dodged and burned and made your own creative choices. But I'm really going for that classic, straight out of the developing, process, and just trying to make it a little bit more true to what I was hoping that it looked like. So just kind of sticking around here, bringing in our Pro Mist, our fancy, very expensive Pro Mist. Brought down some contrast. We can like really play that up and see what's happening, bringing it back in. That feels a lot more like film to me.
It does.
Right? Like just look at like all this detail back into his face.
Yep.
You can see the transition of light to dark in his jacket the most. And I think that's really what you're looking for, is that like really light transition, in my opinion. Again, no wrong answers. So let's talk about like a global. So here's our cooler image. And I feel like I knew this was shot later in the day. This was one of our last shots. So I want to say it should be a little bit warmer.
Agreed.
I also just feel like the path of least resistance is important in my work. So I never try to make it look like something it's not. And I know there are so many talented people that can change a photo every which way. But yeah, I like to just kind of like go with what I saw. And we're going to go back into that tone curve and play with, again, like I can still bring down the highlights again, which is awesome. And just make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to make it look like a film photo. Into our color grading. So let's just check. So this is a bit more blue to green to yellow to orange. The red undertone's kind of interesting in this one, yeah?
Yeah, the red undertone is probably my favorite.
So I wonder if we can do like a little bit of a light touch of that, just to like, and I think it's helpful because of his jacket.
Yes.
So we're straying away from Portra, but we're sticking close, And we're looking at the highlights now. Maybe keep it warm. What do you think?
Yeah. Keep it warm. That's my vote.
Great. Let's look at our midtones. We've only done that like once really, but I typically don't touch the midtones all that much. I'm just going to keep it a little bit warmer too. Let's look at a before and after.
Yep.
How are you feeling about it?
This is
feeling pretty good?
I'm feeling really good about it. I love all the detail that came back in his face.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. I'm liking it too. Let's add some grain because one of our things is texture. I stay in the like 30s to 40s in terms of amount, and then you can play with size. And that's, you know, it's hard to see here, but it does add that level of texture. Here's our next one. You can see it kind of populating when it's rendering. Great. And here's our last look. This is him closing the gate, which is when I back up. He is wearing Balenciaga sneakers.
Wow.
Just need everyone to know. Of course, my dad was like, wait, can I have those? And I was like, no. So this is shot at the end of the day, lights going down. The thing that I'm noticing is I feel like the shadows need the most love. Like I don't want it to go like too dark here. I think that'll tell everyone what's really happening, which is that this is a digital photo. And I think when I use contrast, I actually love bringing it down because it also affects the shadows. Like it kind of just helps that idea that there's a smooth transition from highlights to shadows. Let's talk about Ektar here, actually. I don't think we're going to go that way, but like the blues, right? For Ektar, just for your education, because I think you might want to try this. The blues are more teal in Ektar, like this. And I think that's like everything's just more vibrant. So you can like really play up the vibrance, less so the saturation, but more so
the vibrance
when you're playing with those things. And it's like definitely a warmer image. And you need to keep like really playing up the blue.
This is probably where I would easily navigate to first.
Yeah. And like actually it really helps those Balenciagas. Oh, it's funny. I love that. I'm gonna leave it a little bit. Not gonna lie, it's kind of fun. So let's start with our highlights here. Let's think about like sunset. Like, what does sunset feel like? It's warm. I want to say. So we're gonna stick in that warmth, and let's check the shadows. Like, if we really brought it down, that's starting to look a lot more like film, in my opinion.
Yes, agreed.
But this is also a film look where there's a little bit more of that red.
Yes.
So we can always take it there. And again, for me particularly, I'm more into like a moody photo. And it's just my flavor. Doesn't have to be yours. I think my favorite thing about learning from others is you take what you want and you leave what you don't.
Exactly.
You leave it and you're like, that's not how I would do it. And that's great. I love that. And we're just doing this one a little quickly because I want to get into Photoshop.
Yeah.
And I want to show you some film versus digital photos and as a little palette cleanser. Let's just do a little before and after.
I love that.
It's working. I think something else to consider, not for every photo, if I can find it very quickly, is a vignette. You know, some images have, you know, you can always like bring in a little bit of a vignette. And what I'm doing is a reverse vignette. And the goal is to like keep opening up those shadows that are on the outside. It's very slight. It's the tiniest amount. And it also helps hopefully draw your eye to, you know, to the centerpiece, which is my grandfather. So I'm just going to copy paste. And we're just going to check them out. Looking good.
Beautiful.
I love it. So good.
Oh, I love.
Yeah, more in the moment. Yeah. So that's just a general workflow in Lightroom. I think it's a really nice way. And if you didn't have any more time, you could probably send these off and be like, I feel good about it, you know? So I think that's great.
Oh my goodness, Ashley, thank you so much. This was so beautiful.
Perfect. So do you want to look at some digital versus film images?
Let's clean our palette.
We'll come back.
And then move into Photoshop.
So I pulled some fun film photos for you that I've done in the past. Hopefully they pop up. Here we go. What's a good way to show you these?
Wait, did you say this one was film?
This is film. Oh. So I thought this would be a good chance for us to talk about what film looks like, actually. So this is, every time I shoot, I try to shoot some on film for myself. So this is a fashion shoot, and these are all unedited as well. But this is of a model named Tia, and all the light is coming from the back, except for some, you know, I put some major white V-flats right behind me. So that's to take the light from the back and then push it back onto her. So what are you seeing in terms of like maybe the color or the texture or the contrast? Like what kind of tells you that this is a film photo, in your opinion?
See, I didn't think it was film.
Yay! That's so interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think it was film at all.
I think the way that I can tell is the texture. And I think that we can do this in a digital space now. But you're right, this didn't really particularly feel too much.
Because of the color. The color didn't feel, it didn't feel film-like for me. So I was just like, that's why I said, wait, this is a film?
You're like, wait, what? But skin tone wise, I think also maybe a good,
a good indicator there.
Here's some film.
This looks like, this does feel like film.
Yeah, this is a musician. His band name is Toro y Moi. And I think what I can tell the most is a couple of things, and maybe you can agree, but like even just the fall off.
The fall off is exactly what I felt.
His neck is here. Definitely texture. Like this is just a scanned image. There isn't any treatment on it. But yeah, there's some really good fall off. And I think that's where we take that clarity down.
Mm-hmm.
And then the color space, like it's definitely warm and cool at the same time, I think.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Here's another film photo. You know, it's just like there's an interest in the color space that I think is hard to really emulate sometimes, but I think with a lot of good Photoshop knowledge, you can pretty much do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to show you a wide range of skin tones as well, just to see how film handles. But yeah, this is, you know, natural light.
What kind of film was this all shot on?
I think I mostly stick to Portra 400.
Okay.
The reason is I'm not ever really sure where I'm going to be and what I'm doing. So I typically have that on hand, and it usually works. And you just have to accommodate. So, you know, this was on a set where I was using lights. And so I had to find a new way to work or use the lights if I wanted to have that same look. And this is outside. Wow. And again, I think what you can see is actually like, this didn't turn into crazy shadow, even though you can tell how high the sun was, you know?
Wow, this is stunning.
Yeah. And then I wanted to show you some of my digital work that I wanted to make look like film. So this is my friend Melissa, and I think this is a really great example of what we've been doing, which is like a really warm image with some blue undertones. This is my friend Bree, where I added a lot of texture. You can see the grain from here, essentially.
Yes, you can see that.
Again, my friend Melissa, this is what I was hoping to show you more of, like that Kodak gold. So it's like really warm, but then there's some interesting, cool aspects to it. We didn't talk anything about black and white, but I think it's a really fun place to try some things out. And then this was a campaign image for a clothing brand. So again, it was like, how do I make it feel like film without, you know, changing the colors of the clothing too much? You know, they still need to sell it at the end of the day. So, but I think what you notice is like, I really pulled the shadows here, and it was a really bright day. Yeah.
Oh, I love. So stunning.
And then I just wanted to pull some like images that I love. They're not mine, but I think these are really good. Like the more you train your eye looking at what you like and what you don't like, you can take that into your shooting and your editing. So I don't know if these are film. And I think, you know, if there's anything that stands out to you, this is where I think I'm transitioning to a cooler image.
Yeah.
I just love this feeling of where this person is. And I don't know, there's just something about it that makes it feel otherworldly, but still in this world, you know?
Agreed.
This is where the clarity comes into play. Again, I don't know if this is a film photo or not, but they really dialed down the clarity. And I think they also added this reverse vignette that we just did.
Yes,
you can
see that
it
as well. You can definitely see that.
Here's that fall off that we're talking about with my photo. And I think there are many ways you can use blur in Photoshop to achieve the same thing. But this feels like a film photo to me, like a medium format. This is more of like a color space where I think like you see how like orange and gold the skin tones are and how green the greens are. Love it.
Oh, beautiful.
And I pulled this for you, Ektar. I think.
Oh, I love, yeah, that vibrancy.
But I feel like, you know, you can see this gradation, this really beautiful gradation.
The gradient is so beautiful, and her skin looks so beautiful and warm as well.
Right, and you can tell like the sun's right overhead, you know? So anyways.
Oh, I love. I hope y'all enjoyed that comparison. I have been talking, girl, I've been talking about, oh, I'm gonna try to do film. I think a nice transition for me is to try some of these techniques editing wise, and then start to, because I have 2 film cameras. I just have not touched them.
Oh my gosh.
So you're really inspiring me to play around and just kind of see what other looks and feels I can get, because I just love how tangible these images feel, how you kind of feel pulled into the situation scenario. And I think that's the one thing I love about film in general.
Yeah.
So I love how you're able to just do that digitally or do that in your editing essentially.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to play around and send me when you work on
Oh,
it.
girl, I will.
So
Don't
excited.
worry.
Okay,
And
good.
I will. And y'all make sure to play around as well. If you are like me and more so a digital photographer who's a little bit afraid of film, this is a nice transition.
Yeah.
And being able to explore, all the different mediums and ways that you can bring an image to life.
I agree. So with our last, 30 minutes or so, I wanted to show you, I already have this already set up and we can talk through it. And then maybe if there's time, we can do one more.
Perfect.
But I think that there's just different thought processes around how to use Lightroom versus Photoshop. For me in Photoshop, it's like I can spend more time, I can make layers, I can go back. And I think, everyone has their own ways of doing things, but it's really nice for me to take that time in Photoshop. So I pulled this one image just to play around, and I wanted to talk through what I think we should do. And what I always do, I don't know about you, but I always start with a cleanup layer. So I just essentially copied and made a new layer. Nothing has changed except for it's just a copy. And just for the sake of it, I'm just going to clean up a little bit. And just see. So with all of your vibrant colors in the way that you shoot, what is your Photoshop experience like? Are you really just pushing the colors a little bit more, do you like contrast? What's your favorite?
I probably am just pushing the colors a bit more, and I just like to excuse me, I like to just play around and see what I can get. So in Photoshop, I really love Selective Color. That is my go-to. Me and Selective Color are like this. We best friends, we girls, I love Selective Color because you can just really, opposed to what you were doing in Lightroom, where everything was more general and kind of impacted the whole image. And yes, there's ways you can use brushes and whatnot in Lightroom, but I love Photoshop for Selective Color to really target certain colors and to really push how much I can do. So I might look at my reds and be like, I want to do something crazy. Or if I have one of the last shoots I did, I shot my friends in front of this really bright yellow building, and I wanted to play around with the colors and the tone of just that building. And so you can get so much and you can do so much with Selective Color. And so that's probably my favorite thing to do. There's just something about color that's just so beautiful, such a story. And then other things, like I'll start off with cleanup and then I'll go into like, maybe if I need to do some skin editing, I'll do that next. Then I'll focus in on color, or I'll focus. And let me preface this as well. Beforehand, I already did anything, like any kind of correction I wanted to do with my brightness, contrast. I would have done that already in Lightroom before I sent the image over to Photoshop.
Right.
So by the time I get in Photoshop, it's just clean up, skin, and play with as much color as I can.
I love that. Well, maybe we should try. I haven't done this for this image, but we should think about Selective Color. Maybe there's not a lot going on here, but I'm curious. I like Selective Color too.
I love it. Even like with the one thing I love about Selective Color too, you do have the blacks. It's the same thing as adding the colors in your shadows as you did in Lightroom. And so I love to play around with the blacks and the whites, because then you can really add a lot of depth to your image as well.
Oh, cool. Okay, let's do that. Well, before I forget, something that's also indicative of a film photo is the crop. A good medium format ratio is a 4:5. And I did shoot on a medium format digital camera, so I figured I might crop now and just see what's happening. I didn't really want all of the like top part of the black flag that I had, so anyways, just a little, like, another little magic tool is like, just use the crop, make it feel more like film.
Yes.
So when we think about blacks and whites in Photoshop, I think of it as more of like a curves layer. There's so many more ways to do that in levels and exposure. There's so many ways to go about it, but again, this is how I would do it. So I made a curve layer. Let me just show it to you. Where did it go? Got to move some things around here. So here's my curve layer. Why am I not seeing it?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm so confused. Let me just see if I have it open here too, just in case. Have it open in multiple places just in case. Huh.
Does anybody know where we can pull back up the curve layer? Or the... you're looking for that box that'll show up with...
Yeah, it's usually here, so it's just kind of funny that it's not showing up. Here we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right, we're back. Thank you. Okay, so highlights and shadows. So a good way to do that is to create a new curve layer. So I basically went down here. There's so many ways to do it, but I went curves, added a curve, and then I changed my blending mode to soft light. And a good way to start is have it be super flat. Making sure my brightness is good. And then what I did was I saw that the highlights were like screaming. So I pulled it down. And just to see, like, here's highlights, bringing them up. Here's highlights, bringing them down. Here's our shadows, bringing them down. In a film photo, we want to bring them up. And again, this is like, I didn't take anything from Lightroom. We're starting from scratch again, just in case. And so here's a little before and after. You can tell that the shadows are pulled, and then the highlights, I kind of would go a little bit more, honestly, to make it feel more like film. Great. So then what I did is I went here, I made a new curve for film, and I changed it to color blending mode here. And let's just see what I did, and we can do it again. But essentially, if you can see here, I pulled up the blues here, down in the midtones, and we can start again, just so you can see what I did. But I wanted to remember too, so that's why I kept it. So I pulled up the blues on this one here to make the shadows a little bit more warm. And everything should be so minute. I think that's like the best editing tip, is like really, 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 really gentle. So we're just gonna go into here, before and after. You can see like it's bringing a little bit more warmth into his skin. So again, like in the shadows, I pulled up the blues. And then in the more highlights, midtones. And then we're just gonna check the green channel. And this is basically what we did in Lightroom, where we had that slider in the top of white balance where it's blue and yellow and green and magenta. I haven't done anything with the greens, but it's just so nice to like really gently. I think if we're going for Annie, we're gonna pull the greens up. And again, don't want him to look super different, but want to give us like a space, you know? How do we feel about that so far in terms of color?
That is beautiful. Yeah, I like that a lot.
It's really subtle. Before, after. That's nice.
Yes, that's beautiful.
So good. So again, with Photoshop, I think, you know, start with your cleanup layer like we talked about. Anything that you want to do skin related, I would start early. And then let's go into like our, you know, highlights and shadows. Make sure if you want to go for a film look, we're going to pull the highlights in, shadows come up, so that we just kind of have that gradation of light to dark a little bit different. But if you want to make it, you know, your own, you could crank up the contrast, turn it black and white. There's so many ways to do it. And then the last thing, well, second to last thing I would say is texture. So we did, you know, our color, we did our contrast and texture. So after talking to lots of people and making sure that what I was doing was correct, film photos have a lot of different kinds of texture. So we're just going to dial right in here. But as you can see here, I have 3 different kinds of noise.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is, again, a film photo doesn't have one kind of grain, it has multiple.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of my solve for how to add a little bit of nuance to it so that it's not like uniform and just, you know, one thing and then you can really tell. Like a film photo just has a little bit more character. So we were able to do that. And the way that I did that, and we can turn these on after I show you one, is I'm going to make a new layer here. And then I'm going to fill it with 50% gray. And then from there, I keep having to move our zoom window. I'm going to add noise. And so this is 70% Gaussian. Okay. And as you can see, I can't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would try, and again, I think it's really personal preference, is I would make 3. And so the first one I made is a soft light. And then you can play with the opacity of it.
Yep.
So on this one, my first soft light, I made the opacity 2, just to make it super simple.
Yep.
So I'm just going to dump that just so we know, and we can just turn the opacity up just to see what it's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like giving it just a little bit gives that texture, and I'm looking specifically in these highlights.
Mm-hmm.
So then what I did is I actually copied this same layer 2 times over, and you can do that by pulling down into the plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I renamed it, but I renamed it Vivid Light. And the reason is I changed the blending mode to Vivid Light. And same thing, I kept the opacity low, but we can keep going. And you can see that the different blending modes are going to affect it differently.
Yep.
And I think it only stands to benefit because it feels like it's opening the image up a bit and not making it super dark, which is not great for a film photo. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, again, I copy and pasted, and then I changed the blending mode to linear light. And there's so many more that we can play with, you know, but these are kind of the 3 that seem to be tried and true. Mm-hmm. And again, just playing with that opacity, making sure we like it. When you zoom out, it doesn't seem to be super heavy-handed, but when you get in there, you can tell that there's like, you know, a little bit, which is great. So again, just to back up, we have our cleanup layer. We created a soft light curve for our blacks and our whites. Then we went into our color, and I think this is a chance where you can spend a lot more time, just like we did, you know, like we can talk about selective color. We can go into hue, saturation, color balance. There's so many ways to go. It's great. And that's the beauty of it. There's not one right answer to go to get the same outcome, which is awesome. So again, it's highlight, shadow, color, and texture. So we added a bunch of good texture in the form of noise. And then just for fun, I added something at the end, which you can always do. And I have a bunch more here, but basically I pulled a few textures that we could pull into a photo. This is a contact sheet, you know, just to give it a little bit more of that like texture. And so I don't know if you do this, but I
do not. So that's why I'm really excited.
Yeah, I would say this is not like the best example. This is not my aesthetic decision, but I love when I can see that the image has texture of its own. I almost wish that I could spend the time and show you what it would look like to like maybe it looked like this photo was printed and then creased. You know, that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
But basically what I did is I grabbed one of those textures here and I pulled it over into the image, and then I made a mask. So I'm actually going to I'm going to redo that. But basically that was the image that I pulled in, and I pulled it onto screen. But again, in terms of a blending mode, but there's so many ways, as you can just see, that a blending mode might affect. Like that actually might be something interesting for later. But if you want to make it look a certain way, and this is not necessarily my aesthetic, but I thought it would be nice to think about texture.
Yes.
So I have it on screen, and I'm going to keep the opacity at 100, but then I'm going to add a layer mask. And the reason is I really only want it to affect a certain part of the of the image itself. I'm going to turn that off too. And what I'm going to do in order to do that is, right now the layer mask is on white, which means that it's showing everything. So if I want to hide everything, I'm going to hit Command I. Now it's gone, which is, oh my gosh, great. And then I'm going to take out my brush, and I'm just going to gently paint over in white onto the layer mask where I do want to see it. So maybe it was just like the craziest little light leak, you know, like that just came into the camera here. Who knows? Just as like a test to see what it does.
Yeah.
Who knows if that's something you want. And then, I don't know if there's anywhere else. Maybe I'll try to stay away from his clothing, but maybe if we just brought it in just a little bit.
Just a little bit, yep.
Especially in the highlight areas, you know. Great. Let's just try this. Who knows? You never know, right?
You never know. That's the fun part of it all.
Yep. This was something that's new for me too, where I'm just like trying out a few more textures. So as you can see, it doesn't look amazing yet, but I think what you can do is you can create some curves and some saturation to make it feel like it's more part of the image, of the scene. Yeah. So we're going to do that here. So we're going to do a curve for the film. And as you can see, I already have it being, you know, only working with the image below. So you can see this little arrow here.
Yes.
So as you can see, I already did this before, but I only applied it to this film overlay. And you can look at my curve layer, but like I really burned it in. But I'm really just taking down the highlights a bunch and just seeing, like, again, I don't think this is like my final image, but just to make it look more like film, like maybe it got lost in the sun for a little bit, or, you know, who knows. But what you want to do is make sure anything that you do is going to only affect that one layer.
Yes.
So I just brought it down a bunch. And again, like we can play with opacity. Like it doesn't need to be this like screaming, you know, which is
nice
great.
And subtle. Yeah, I like it more subtle.
Yeah. And then same thing, I made a layer that was only going to affect what was below it, which is our screen film layer, as I'm calling it. And this is saturation. And I really brought the saturation down. So here is it like, you know, at 1, it's just enough that it doesn't change the color all that much, which is great. And in general, like, I feel like what I'm seeing is like, let's just say I do want to keep this. I think maybe I want to bring more of that warmth into the overall image, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back into my color curve and see what I can do. So let's just see. Who knows? Again, who knows? It's just nice to like be able to go back, try things. So by pulling down into the blue channel, I'm adding warmth.
Yeah.
Which is, I feel like I'm missing that. And now that I'm seeing it, I'm like, oh, I love it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. You're bringing it back in.
That's feeling a little bit better to me.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? So then it just feels like a time and a place. So let's just take a quick look at what we've done. So I'm going to pull this all out. from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. And then, wow.
Wow, I love.
So nice. So good.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
And I'm just going to recrop it because I know we opened up a new one. Yeah, I mean, that's, if I think the other thing that I'm noticing, and you know, we can do this a million ways, is I feel like in a film photo, this would be not as dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can go back into that color curve, but we can also make a new one, or sorry, we can make another curve for the highlights and shadows. And I'm just going to call this like garden shadows. And I'm going to do the same thing where I've found that if you make a soft light layer and then you make it super flat, which means that it's actually doing nothing. And then what I'm going to do is just look at this left-hand side of the image and bring those shadows up a bit. That's feeling a little bit more like film. Then I'm going to go into my layer mask and hide it. And then I'm going to paint it back with white, which means that it's going to show the work that I just did. So that's feeling like, you know, that transition again from dark to light is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, I just really love how much you've been able to study film and you can call out certain aspects. And it's just really, it's really important because you really understand. What I can tell is that you really understand film, and so it's really great to kind of see how you called out the background. You were like, okay, you know, that's too dark. Let me go ahead and do this to kind of brighten that area up so it looks more like film. So I really like that.
Yeah, and again, I have my little cheat sheet if anyone wants to if anyone wants to screenshot this.
Yes, take a little screenshot, take the notes, y'all.
Right
so
here.
That way y'all know if you want to do the same thing, you guys know what you can do.
So just as a little recap, this top left note here, I made a cleanup layer, which you always want to do no matter what kind of editing you're doing. And you might have multiple cleanup layers if you're going a little crazy, which I love. Then we're going to do a soft light curve for your blacks and your whites. And again, a film photo has that, like the histogram is a little bit different looking. So you want to pull the blacks up and the highlights down so that they just have that nice transition between the two. Then we're going to do a color curve for film look. So that means make a curve layer, turn the blending mode to color so that it only affects the color and not the exposure. And then play with your blue channel and probably your green channel. I typically don't touch the reds too much, but again, get in there, see what happens, decide what you like. And then we're gonna add 3 different layers of noise. And you're gonna do that by creating a new blank layer, going to edit, fill, and fill with 50% gray to add noise. And you're going to do that 3 times over. So our blending layer will hopefully be soft light, vivid, and linear. And then add film light leaks if you'd like. And then just manipulate that. So
love. And can you actually, can you go back? We had a comment if we can move that bottom note up, because on the live it's like behind our heads. So
how about here?
Yep, there we go. And that way we can just go over, if you don't mind going over that again.
Yes, absolutely.
And people can take their screenshots.
I know, I need these. So like, that's why I made them for everyone here, is just that it's, you know, it's a lot of information in a couple of hours. And this is a great way for you to just take a quick screenshot. And so what I did is I did some homework again after over a decade of doing this, and just making sure that I knew exactly what to tell you guys in terms of some film stocks and how to emulate them. So I think our favorite these days are Portra. So if you're shooting 160, 400, or 800, I've got some ideas here. But overall, they have a yellowish highlight and a bluish shadow. Portra 160 has red and brown undertones, really low saturation, low contrast. As I said, it's really good for portraiture and consistent results. I think even if you shot a roll of film, you'll see that there are some ebbs and flows of your image. 400 has a bit more orange and yellow undertones. And 800 has a higher saturation and is slightly grainier because it's a higher ISO. And the blacks are a bit more rich. So, and that's where I found that, you know, people are saying on the internet that there's a certain amount of grain that would look good for your Portra 800, but who knows? It's all, you know, it's all to taste. And then Ektar is really great for portrait. And again, it's rich shadows and cooler mid-range. And I think you might like that. And the one we didn't talk about is a Fuji Pro 400, which is rich contrast with some cool shadows. So the Fuji images are going to be a bit more cooler. And then if I drag this down, here's your other cheat sheet, which is color, contrast, and texture. Those are things that I really want you to think about when you're creating a filmic image. Yeah.
I love this. Was so beautiful.
Thanks. Do you have any other final things we should do in our last couple of minutes? Do you want to show me some of your selective color?
Yes, let's go. Let's go to selective color so we can just kind of see it.
Show me.
I love selective color because, as you can see there, with where it says colors, you can, if you press the drop down, you have where it says reds. Yeah, if you press it, you have reds, yellow, green, cyans, blues, all of the colors. And so with what I love is that within each color, you can impact like the colors within that color. So for example, if you stay on the red, well, there's no reds in this. Maybe let's go to the blacks.
Ooh, okay, great. Love it.
If you want to add cyan to your blacks, you can move it to, I think, the right, and it's going to add that in there. If you want to remove it and it's more magenta, you can go ahead and do that. Same thing with the magenta. If you want to add magenta to your photo, you can move it to the right, the slide to the right. And if you want to remove, and it's going to be more of that like greenish, yellowish colors, you can do that. And then same with yellow and black. So I love this because it's just, I find it fun. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to color, but I find it fun to just really sit and see how all the different colors add a different mood and feel to your photo. So even though this doesn't have, you know, reds or blacks or anything, or sorry, reds or greens or whatever in the images, there's a little bit of green there. I would focus on the blacks, or I would go to the whites where you're going to add the colors to your highlights. I don't really do neutrals often, but that's also another option there too.
Okay. Well, in my blacks, I just actually worked on the yellow channel, and that added a little bit more blue again, which is nice. And just a little bit of the black just to like bring that transition back. And let's go into the whites. This is great. So it's really just in the highlights.
It's really just in the highlights, and you can target it. And the other great thing is that if you sometimes if I'm doing the blacks, I might do a little bit too much, but I like the color, so I might go to my opacity and just bring it down a bit. But you can just really play around and see what style and looks you get.
I'm curious of the greens, like, does that do anything with the garden? Does it not? Is it too muted in my photo? Anything?
And sometimes that's what I do. Sometimes it's just like, will this change anything? And so you just kind of play with the slider. If not, cool, you move on. If it does, you found something new. So this is my go-to. I think the neutrals would probably really be nice for this photo as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm actually really loving the neutrals on this. And I'm sort of now, again, it's all to taste, but I'm kind of straying away from the original like blue undertones and just look, I mean, that's amazing. That's all thanks to the neutrals, right? Here's before and after. Yeah, that just gave it so much more life.
Yes. And there's just so much range. Like you can just, I think that's my favorite tool in Photoshop when it comes to coloring, because there's just so much range in what you can do.
It's incredible.
I love it. Oh, I love it.
That's so cool. I love that. And I think it's looking really good. I think the only other thing is sometimes I do a final thing where I take everything, I copy it by hitting Command J, and then I make its own layer by Command E. And right here is like our top layer of the last thing we did. And I don't know. This is like a nice finish for the image, but I'll do a high pass filter, which actually is going to bring a little bit more sharp back to the image. And I'll show you why, but it's like the tiniest bit of texture, right? I'm going to turn that back to a soft light, and then I'm going to actually make a layer mask, invert it, and then bring back some texture in certain places, like maybe the garment needs a little bit.
Yes.
And again, I did that super low, or maybe like, you know, parts of the skin need just a little bit of it.
Yes.
And it's really just to help draw that eye back to where you want people to look. But that's just kind of like my interesting way to add some other noise or a little bit of interesting sharpening without affecting the whole image. Yeah. So it's going to be very, very subtle, but you can see
the difference.
Just like the tiniest bit. It just really refocuses your eye in this area, at least where I can see now, but maybe from a live standpoint, it's like, so yeah, I think it's looking good.
This was amazing. I hope that y'all enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm going to be smiling for probably the rest of the day. So Ashley, thank you so much. Make sure y'all go ahead and give her a follow on Instagram. When does this come out? You said it comes out in September, correct?
It does. Okay. And there's a motion aspect where we did shoot it on film. So you'll see that too.
I'm excited. I cannot wait. So make sure you'll go ahead and follow Ashley so that way you can be aware of when this drops. We got a little bit of a sneak peek, which is great. And make sure upcoming, you also make sure that you join Andrew Hawkrandall and learn the basics of Adobe Illustrator, from creating a new artboard to exporting your first project. You want to make sure you come and learn the basics of Adobe Illustrator. And then immediately following the bootcamp, stick around for another week of power prompts with Cody Bear. This week's prompt is walk time for Doggist. So make sure y'all stick around. Thank you so much for joining the feed. I loved it. Ashley, thank you so much. I'm gonna be connected with you offline.
Yay, good. Thank you.
But I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll see y'all next time.
Yay.
Bye. Bye.